Hello, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Wild Wisdom Wellbeing guest slot with myself, Robin Harris of Equenergy Wellbeing Naturally. And today I am delighted we have Anna Easton of True Wellbeing here with us this morning. So, Anna, I've been looking at your wonderful website, and I know that you do a lot of work with businesses and sort of HR and managers and staff. But if you would like, maybe first of all, to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be on this well-being journey.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin. I'm delighted to be here and lovely to be talking to you today. So thank you for the opportunity. I came to wellbeing via a kind of quite a checkered path with my previous career, just mainly to do with, energy levels. I was working in property previously, and it's a challenging environment for anyone to be in, particularly an empath, and that's very much what I am. So, a sales environment is tough, and I didn't really realize, because I was good at what I did, I didn't really realize that the energy was off. And I really struggled then with my mental health. I suffered with burnout. I got to a place where I was completely overwrought with everything that I was doing, and just my whole equilibrium was off. And I decided to take some time, and luckily, actually, and thankfully, which didn't quite feel like thankfully at the time, but I lost my job and decided to move industries, and was teaching yoga at the time, so decided to move into wellbeing workshops because I was bored of talking at people. I wanted to engage more, because that's what I think this is all about. Everything that we're discussing in terms of wellness and wellbeing all revolves around connection and people finding their voice and understanding themselves. So I just started, kind of almost ripped off the plaster and started from scratch with me, and did a lot of work with self-care and mind, body, and just figuring out what different pieces I needed for my own prescription for me to be well. And that's what brought me to realize how individual well-being is. There's no one size fits all, and as much as I'd like to put everything under the umbrellas that or pillars that I work under, which are mind, body, and environment, there's a language which is actually now my fourth pillar, because it's our own internal language that dictates how everything falls in under those other topics. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at just now.
I think that's so true, that a lot of us, I think, when we start out on this well-being path, certainly in the way that we've done it, it's very much because that was my path, because that was the learning that I needed to go through. And having been through that learning, I've realized how crucial it is, how essential it is for all of us, and just want to share that. And knowing that it isn't one size fits all, wanting to give people the language or the tools or the connection with themselves. It's as much connection with others and the environment and the world in which we live as connection with ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think we're doing workplace wellness as well, which is kind of how things have evolved. So I started with private wellbeing workshops, and then they kind of quickly progressed, and I realized that was a great platform for just opening up who I could talk to, who would hear the message, because not people don't generally stand up and say, I need well-being. So that was a great platform. But then what I've come to realize is that people connecting with themselves, and again, this comes back to the individuality and the language that we use, it's also about connecting yourself to and embedding yourself in one of the ways which you spend the majority of your time. You know, you're working a minimum of kind of 8 hours a day, and that's leached into more with the blurred lines between home working.
Oh.
Yeah, and so the kind of it's really important for individuals to find their rhythm and their connection with each other from a work perspective as well. And that will be, again, it's not just about giving someone a desk and a computer and making sure that those things are checked boxes. It's about a holistic approach for each individual, but doing that fits in with a company, with company standards also.
And I think that must be so particularly true at the moment. And you were saying just before we went live about how it's all mushroomed kind of recently because of the whole coronavirus situation and people either being furloughed or working from home and now perhaps going back into the office. And I know from my brother, he was furloughed initially. And then suddenly on a Monday morning, he started back at work. And it was like, there was no support for the fact you've been away, you've been told to be isolated, you've been told to stay at home and not go anywhere. And now all of a sudden you're back in an environment, quite a busy environment sometimes, and you're working a full it's more than 9 to 5 in his job quite often. Yeah. It blurs those edges, even though he's in an office and then going home. But you to do the full week, and the body just has got out of that rhythm. I love the way you talk about rhythm and equilibrium, which is part of the word that I use even for my business. Equenergy comes from equilibrium and energy, and trying to find that balance for ourselves and for what we're doing, which, as you say, so much of what we do often is our work.
Absolutely. And this is, a big part of why we've even connected in the first instance, because we found, that we operate on a similar trajectory and energy level. And I think that we generally do, and particularly with work, when we have that commonplace scenario, then it's hugely important for you to find your tribe almost within your own workplace organizations. But there's a huge responsibility for the companies themselves and upper management to make sure that they are factoring in the things like you've talked about. We're picking you up from one scenario and we're putting you into another place. And yes, that is governed and dictated by the pandemic and the rules surrounding that. But it just needs to be brought to the forefront of people's minds. It's not just a case of, right, I'm just going to continue to do my job regardless. It's about, okay, this is a real opportunity. And that's exactly how I see this whole thing, as individuals finding their best ways of working. And when I say working, that's not even just doing their work. It's their best way of functioning, of integrating themselves into the tasks that they're doing with their colleagues in their day-to-day routines, their rhythm, like we've talked about. People need to find theirs, but they also need support. And it's great that these conversations are being had now more on a board level than they ever were before. But for any individuals out there who work within a company, you can suggest things. You can say, this is what's right for me. And I think that that's a big part of this. This isn't about a dictatorship anymore. This is bringing together a community and a collective. And what do we want this to look like? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that I've worked with people who describe their working environment, which may be quite a large organization or institution, that often they're feeling very restricted. They're feeling that they have to work to the organization and its structure.
Yeah.
And finding it perhaps getting quite toxic. And then wondering, what can I do as an individual other than just leave, in this environment, which is from the top down quite toxic. Yeah. And feeling that it's so rigid in its structure that from the lower levels upwards, they don't have an awful lot of power and influence.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is a frustrating and an ongoing plight for most people, you know, working within organizations, isn't it? And that's not necessarily just indicative of the pandemic, but lots of companies have often run this very hierarchical structure, whereas it's kind of, you know, it's instilled in people that they don't have any input, any opportunity to input about their individuality into that larger mainframe, which formulates our company culture within any organization, small or large. And so I think this is just a real opportunity. And one thing that I urge people to do is just think about the things that are important to them. You know, that is, it can be as simple as that, a little period of reflection on just, you know, what is it that is important to me in my day to day? You know, do I like to exercise? Do I like to meditate? Do I like to, you know, take a walk at lunchtime? Do I function best in the mornings with talking to people, or keep those meetings for the afternoon? You know, it's about real investigation and watching yourself at the moment and watching what your reaction. I do a lot of reflective timetabling as well. So I don't set myself a kind of timetable. I just kind of run a rhythm for a couple of days or a week, and then I'll kind of retrospectively examine my timetable, or, you know, input my timetable, and then go, what worked for me this past week? What, you know, and how should I use that moving forward? At the moment, it feels like that changes every week, but we do what we can.
And because things are changing around us every week, it's also, how can we build our resilience? How can we build our flexibility so that outward changes don't throw us?
Yeah.
That we've got that ability to go with them to a degree.
Yes, we do. You know, in a changing landscape, and we even a changing personal ecosystem, we need to have that awareness even more than we normally might. You know, but when we're going along and doing things by rote, yes, that's a lot more energy efficient, and things that you just kind of, you know, going along with the flow, whereas the flow itself is disrupted at the moment. So that's why you have to watch and understand exactly your place as the salmon in that stream, that flow stream. So yeah, I think it's a real opportunity again. I use the analogy quite often about kind of imagine your life as a snow globe, and then shaking it up. And where do you want all of those pieces of snow, which are the different kind of projects in your life to land, and elements of your life, not just the project. So my programs are designed to help individuals, but from a kind of collective perspective. And so, you know, these are all exercises that you can do in teams or individually. And that's the point. It wants to be as malleable as that, because some people do, you know, have different ways of working. So that's really important.
And I think that even if you are working for an organization where you don't feel you have an awful lot of flexibility in how you work, in terms of what you do and the process you do, that process that you have to follow and the times that you have to do things, I think there's still ways in there as an individual, aren't there, that we can really support our own well-being and find the way that's right for us to work within that system.
Yes.
We can still find our balance. We can still find where our energy wants to sit and how we show up. Because I think that's so important as well, that we're still being true to ourselves and our values, even in an environment which might feel a little bit restrictive on some other aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's again coming back to that thing that's about examining what's important to us and then making actions off the back of that. So, you know, I still remember to this day, I moved to Canada. And my brother said, if you're not happy with something, change it. And that has been my, manifesto for life since then, because we're not stuck doing anything. We have choices that we can make. And this is applicable to every single individual. It's the one thing that we are, one of two things I believe that we have control over. So that is the main one, that we have control over our choices. They're not inherent in us. They're not governed by anything other than what we choose to do. Our thoughts, everything is, it is all choices that we make.
Yeah, so it's that when you talk about environment, it's not only the outer environment, it's the inner environment as well. It's the thoughts that we think, so we can choose those. We can choose which ones to feed. We might not choose which ones pop up in our head, but we can choose which ones we want to follow and engage with and feed and grow.
Yes.
And the others we can just, as my last guest was saying, you can get these things that you just put in a box. Yes. And if you want to revisit them later, that's absolutely fine. The box isn't locked. But for the time being, you can choose to focus on the ones that are more supportive, more uplifting.
Yeah, there's a bit of fake it to make it. But, it's all about understanding what's important to you and what tools you put into that box. We build our own personalized toolkit by examining these things, and then we can always revisit it when we're struggling. And so I think that's a huge point to make, is about, creating that toolkit, but then not worrying if you kind of fall off the wagon, so to speak, because I know this can be a real negative loop. It's people think, oh, I'm doing really well, I'm meditating every day, or I'm, doing all of the things that I like, and so stop doing them. And then that negativity of, oh, well, I stopped doing it, I feel really bad now. And you get into that cycle of not going back to it and running away from it and making it, inflaming it so much bigger in your head. And again, that comes back to choices. How do you deal about it in the first instance? And then the second thing that I think is very much, not inherited, certainly not inherited, is our attitude towards life and other people. So choices and attitude are what we have control over.
Absolutely. And those are ours, whatever environment we find ourselves in. And some environments might be easier to choose these supportive and uplifting thoughts and perceptions and attitudes. Some may be more challenging, but they are still what we have control over.
Yeah.
And so, I love that you're talking so much about opportunities in this time, and an attitude. It's a choice of how we want to look at this current situation. But I absolutely agree that, and I've shared on some of the coaches that I run in my group, that the Chinese symbol for disaster, is it disaster? I think it's disaster, is danger plus crisis. Or sorry, danger plus opportunity. It's the Chinese symbol for crisis, I think. It's danger plus opportunity. So within every situation that seems dark and threatening and dangerous, there is an opportunity. And it's just a matter of trusting that it's there, looking for it, tuning into it. And also, you just touched there on how we feel.
Yeah.
How we feel about things. And I think our body gives us so much information in terms of our feelings, in terms of our emotions, in terms of our physical feelings. Is this working for me? Are these thoughts and these choices working for me? And we can always change them if they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they can be changed. Everything is, on an internal screen within us, and we can very much choose the channel or the picture that we have on that screen. And when we move towards the kind of things that we do enjoy, the things that energize us, and we, stand up for ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, then that's when that picture starts to get a lot prettier for a start. And also you know, we make it ours, and we have a sense of connection to it as well, because we think, oh, I did that. And what does that spur on is more positive action in the same vein. And the point that you know, you touch upon, which, or how I relate it to, is all to do with, you know, the fear side of things. We're often so fearful, and we want to remain in control so that we're not fearful. But generally, the best things that are ripe for us are stood right on the other side of that fear. So I've always been a big one of feel the fear and do it anyway, and really embrace those situations, because the opportunity here now is to use that fear and use the opportunity that this has all created to push through and forge our own paths, you know, create some really good super highways in our brain about how we're going to action the next bits that we do, and using it. It's I think it is a huge opportunity, a huge advantage that we've been given here.
And I think when we can drill down into that fear and find out what is behind that fear, what is it, what's triggering it, where's it coming from? Because then I get to the nitty gritty, don't I? I get to that little nugget of wisdom that's actually what I need to learn, possibly about myself. And when you were talking earlier about we can choose, we can control our thoughts, all of these things, we can be ourselves in an organization, we can be true to our values and all of this. Sometimes we don't even realize that we have the permission to do that. We need to get right down to giving ourselves permission to looking at what the fears are in order to be able to move through them.
Yeah, and it's hard to go to those places. You know, we shy away from them because they're uncomfortable to us, and that's why it does take some examining. I always think that the first step is creating awareness around your now picture. You know, what is the snapshot of my life? I always think about the before and after pictures that you see personal trainers and things advertised, and I think, you know, what is my before picture? Or my now picture? Like, what is a genuine and honest snapshot of my life? And what, on the counter of that, do I want my after picture to look like? You know, what does that mean to me? And you often find that you filter out so much stuff just by going through that process, and you surprise yourself with things that you thought were important to you. And then it's like, oh, no, actually, I'm happy when I'm going walking each day in the sunshine, which we've now got, which is lovely. And
oh, isn't it amazing?
Oh, it makes the world of difference. So, yeah, I think it's, you know, we've got to appreciate and enjoy the little things. And a little tweak of a tip that I kind of hit upon yesterday, you know, this week, is this whole thing between gratitude, you know, this whole thing of with gratitude. Often when you start to research any of this, say, make these gratitude lists. And I was doing that, but I couldn't internalize the feeling of gratitude. And then I had someone who just kind of, a client actually, who never says thank you for anything. And again, this comes back to the kind of language point that I made. And so I kind of almost overcompensated and just thought about the understanding of the word thank you. And for me, that generated a lot more feeling and sensation than the word gratitude. So I say, oh, thank you. And it promotes this lovely feeling in me that gratitude just wasn't quite getting to. So again, this comes back to the language, but, you know, find the language that's right for you to tailor your internal dialogue to. And it really is an eye-opener. And something so simple as that has, you know, can really make big changes in your life. They have big ripple effects, I think.
Absolutely. Our words are so important. Our words are creative, aren't they? They create our perceptions because they're part of our thoughts and our beliefs and all that goes into that. And for me, I was in an online summit in December last year, which was all around gratitude and the practice of gratitude and so on. And I think sometimes it has become an overused word, and that may not be the one that works for some people. Thank you maybe works for some people. For me, the actual feeling of it is wonder.
Yeah.
As in just, oh, it's awesome. Yeah. And I had a kind of, like you were saying, this kind of ping light bulb moment about it recently, where I had been looking at the 4 pillars that I base my work on, and I have used them to create the word wild, which is why you'll see wild a lot, because wild for me is also who we truly are. It's our true nature. So not wild as in the sense of chaotic and crazy and out of control, but wild as in natural, true, authentic, honest. And I had wild, the W of wild initially just being wild, but then I realized, no, my W is wonder. My W is just looking at the world around us and the life that, as you're saying, that is on the other side of that fear, the life that we want to step into and create. That is just, that where the whole of your insides just kind of light up.
Yeah, absolutely. And what, this again, it's like, I'm thinking about language and the screen and the image of your mind and just, kind of being in awe of it all. And another phrase springs to mind: whatever you can hold in your head, you can hold in your hand. And it, and the first step to that is the wonder, is the awe about everything, because we have to appreciate what's right there in front of us to be able to develop that into more of what we want. And, this touches on things like law of attraction and all of that. But my aim with workplace wellness is, and that's part of why I've termed it workplace wellness rather than workplace well-being or corporate well-being, is because it's again about that language, and it's reaching people to understand that they create their world. And it's great to have tools, which is why I really champion companies who undertake my projects and whatnot. But it's very much down to the individual to show themselves what is possible, and it all does start with what you've got at the moment. And so wonder at it, be in awe of what you have just now, because it only gets better from here on in.
Absolutely. And the more that you can step into that feeling, because the feeling is the part of the attraction, isn't it? It's part of the magnetism. When it's the visualization that people use, athletes and so on, to create a reality, to manifest that reality, having held it in their heads, it's the part of that brings it into the holding it in your hands that I so often hear about, is actually feel it, because the brain doesn't know the difference. And when we're in that cinema watching on a 180-degree screen where we actually are feeling all of that movement, it's the feel of it that makes it so real, that makes our internal systems and the external universe come into alignment, feel that resonance that makes the manifestation possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you speak my language very much so, Robin. I'm all about that. And I think that's actually where my journey really started with all of this, through learning yoga and bringing my awareness internally. Was the starting point, and it was the ability to connect with myself, because I can now start to watch, the processes that are going on in my body. I can often, see and feel and experience things like my food digesting, or, muscles tightening when I'm running, or things like that. And so now I've been able to connect that to, firstly, my vibration. Well, it's the start of my vibration, and then how that ripples out and how that's connected me to so many different and new people who all think along the same way. And that can't happen just by accident. You know, this is a very much an energy thing, but it's starts within you, you know, just thinking about your breath, and you can do so much consciously. I've healed myself of gastro issues through meditation, and I've helped other clients do the same, coaching clients mainly because I love working on the workplace wellness kind of group settings, but one-to-one is my passion because you can get right into the nitty-gritty with an individual, and you know, you can vibe off each other, you can use different things that will support them in their journey, but it's all about them, and that's what I think is truly magical.
And seeing them when it suddenly their light bulb comes on, and you just see that joy that radiates out from their face and their whole being.
Yeah, absolutely. And they talk about, you know, life architecture, which is one of my coaching programs, and that is really all about that, is designing your life from the outside in, understanding what you're capable of, because that's the magical bit when people have those aha moments, when they go, oh, it's me doing this. I am the process. I am part and parcel of this whole thing. And they start to operate on a different level. Before, they were living in a world which they hadn't realized they were the creator of. And once they get a handle on that, that's just beautiful. And, you know, I'm probably, you know, I wouldn't even say, we're all on a journey, right? So no one's complete in any of this, and it's an evolutionary process. And I've always been one for being really hard on myself, particularly about my overthinking. You know, that's a loop in itself. You can beat yourself up over overthinking and then overthink it more, and so, you know, I understand people's trials and tribulations, because it's not easy. They're starting to absorb this new and acknowledge this new information, which effectively is, even though it's always been there. And that's the kind of where the turmoil comes from. You're like, oh, why didn't I see any of this before? But it's, and it can sometimes be I don't want to use the word painful, but certainly an in-depth process to go through. So, but it's people who are brave, who are taking those steps. You know, they're the champions and pioneers of the future of well-being, who are people who are taking the time to understand themselves. So I urge everyone and anyone to go forward and find your way of doing it. You know, I'm merely a conduit, a facilitator in someone else's process, and I'm so happy to be that and to have uncovered this process just for myself. But now it's time to share it.
Yeah, and there are times, aren't there, when, like you said, it's not easy facing up to our fears, facing up to the challenges, facing up to, I guess, a kind of a cognitive dissonance where, like you say, the truth, our truth, has always been there. It's always been within us, and we only need to discover it, uncover it, or as Neil Donald Walsh used to talk about, remember it, bring it back into our being. But this bit up here sometimes has other ideas, doesn't it? Because it functions in a different way, and it has a different role. It's there to, a lot of it, you know, our negative bias, our negative wiring is there to keep us safe. Yeah. And maybe that primitive part of our brain hasn't really evolved in the same way that the rest of us has, and in the same way as our surroundings have, because there aren't saber-toothed tigers behind every bush these days. There are other things that we've put that fear onto, but they're not, for most of us, thankfully, they're not life and death threatening, even if they might feel that way, even if we interpret them on some level as, no, this is really life or death, this is existential stuff. This keeps me awake at the wee small hours of the morning. But yeah, it's for me, it's a way of finding how we can stand up in our truth and say, thank you very much for trying to keep me safe. But
Yeah.
actually, I have got this.
Yeah.
Making that leap of faith sometimes, where,
Yeah.
like you say, faking it until you make it, which we are kind of faking it, but we're not at the same time, are we? Because it
No.
is in there. We're just stepping into those shoes that still feel way too big.
Yeah. And I, always think about those super highways within your mind. And with this process, the fake it to make it is merely treading down on those dirt roads, which can get you to exactly the same destination if we just make them a little bit more robust. And that's the kind of like, okay, but you've got the default setting of the superhighway already there. And so that's the kind of fake it to make it side of things. But yeah, just keep treading your path, that the ones that feel right and nutritious to you, and the ones that are nurturing everything that you feel within you, because so many of us have been unnurtured, either by ourselves or by our families growing up. And all of these things that have come out of the back of that is our experiences, and they promote our behavior, but our behavior is learned and our behavior can be changed. And so we can do it. We can absolutely make any inroads and changes in our worlds that we want to. And this isn't about should, it's about we could do it, but we're not going to beat ourselves up if we don't. That's the biggest thing that I learned, is to get out of that loop, and find different ways of doing so, having those tools to know how to get yourself out of that loop. And that's why I studied coaching rather than therapy, because I want to think about the forward picture. As much as I think it's good to do reflection and to do therapy, where you're looking at the whys and wherefores of how you got to where you are, I really want to help people with the stage after that, which is right, what does the next bit look like? Let's do some planning. I realized the other day that my grandmother died at 94. I'm 40 years old today. That means I've got 54 years left. So what am I going to do with all of that? We've got a real oyster of an opportunity here to really carve that out. And I've spent 40, I've had 40 years already. And so I'm going to have the next time and a bit more, knowing all of the things that I know up until now, and then also learning so much more in that time, because I know how to learn, how to interpret, how to memorize the things that are good, how to let go of the things that don't serve me. And so let's create that picture again, the life architecture, building those solid foundations to build your dream home on top of, which is your life, and you can do anything that you want to do.
Yep. And as I was starting to say earlier, even though, sometimes this is difficult, it's challenging, we can ask for help, can't we? Because
Yes.
there are people out there like yourself who can sometimes, just when you need that guiding hand, or you need somebody just to be there to kind of hold space for you, or to bounce ideas off, like you would do with a coach or a mentor, just, this is what I'm thinking, how does this look? Because I'm too close. I just need somebody who can be an objective pair of eyes, who can maybe shine some light for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think thinking partners are imperative to our progression and achieving the successes that we want to. You can't do it by yourself, because the conversation that you have one-to-one with yourself is nowhere near as illuminating as the outward conversation that you have with another person. You can talk to a lamppost, they will make a coach than you talking to yourself will. And so it's just about finding the right fit. And I found this with yoga teaching as well. I used to say to my students, go and try all of the different teachers, because you need to find the person who resonates with you and who is right for you. And that's why, what we come to find is we surround ourselves that resonate with us. And I think that that's important for coaching as well is, as much as you don't need to know the ins and outs of someone, then we should trust our energy to, to seek out the people that work for us. And, that always is. So I work on a referral or, application basis just for that reason. So I can get to know someone first to know if it's right for them. I'm not going to, I don't take on every client who asks to work with me, just because I sometimes know when it's not going to be productive for them. So that definitely is important to do your investigations, do your research, and understand what sits with you. Stop looking at things on YouTube and what does that lead to? What other videos does that lead you to? And then who's the person who that mentions? And, just follow the path, follow the cycle of, and you can't go wrong. This is the beauty of it, is, there is no error in anyone's personal journey. It's feedback. Whatever you try things. If it doesn't work out, and then you've got your feedback, exactly what not to do in the next. You can use the like, I always think about my ex-boyfriend, who I was very young when I was with, and he's the epitome of what I do not want in my life. And so that makes it quite wise. And we all know someone who we just think, oh, I just do not understand why I was, how I ever related to that person. So just examine as to why. Is it because they challenged things within you that you come to realize that maybe you want to work on? Or is it just because they represent things that you don't really want in your world? It's again about finding the people with the right rhythm. I very much think that people who are early risers should not go out with night owls, because their rhythms are just off, the circadian rhythms for a start, and that's a fundamental. So yeah, everyone look for people that you can get up and go running at 6 a.m. with, if that's your thing.
And it's also, isn't it, about the people who fitted at one point and won't necessarily fit at another point. So we don't have to stick with something just because it worked at one time. It might no longer be the thing that we need. And that's okay too. That people come into our life maybe for just a time, maybe for longer. But if the time that we are feeling resonant, feeling drawn to that person, feeling that this is really working well, has passed, that's okay. And it's okay for us to change. So if I suddenly feel, I want to grow, I want to change, I want to be something different, that's okay. Everything is okay, as long as we are listening to that internal voice and being as true and close and honest to that as we can be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I fully concur, and always think about it as like two daisies growing up in a field. One will one year get a corner of light and will, grow off tall and in one direction and skinny, and the other one will stay solid and small. And then the next year they might both be in the same patch of light and grow together, or one gets mowed down by a lawnmower or eaten by a cow. There's every eventuality and possibility. And yeah, we don't need to be so hung up on and fixated on someone else, because that brings me back to another mantra that I have, which is two words, which is me and now. The only two things that I can do anything about. I can't have any influence on anyone else, their actions, their thoughts, their behaviors, but I can choose the ones that I have. And then the past is gone. There is no way of changing anything that's happened prior. You can, as much as you can plan for the future, there will be anomalies that come in and blow up your plans. So in the moment, there's you and now in this very moment, the two things that you can do anything about. And so make that moment your best, do the things that feed you and enjoy your life.
And I think that's the thing for me, that when we realize that we are the ones who design and create our own life, whether we do that purposefully and consciously and with awareness and choosing, or whether we do it by default, by not making our own choices, but just allowing choices to kind of happen to us.
Yeah.
We are the ones that are able to manifest what we want in our lives. We are able to create the lives that we live, which means that we can do it exactly the way we want to, and we can make it fun, and we can make it exciting or not, whatever we want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, ride out your emotions. As much as I say, the whole kind of fake it to make it thing, it is good to get into the rhythm of having, some time dedicated towards positive thoughts. But there's also an element of being okay with whatever you're experiencing at the time. Anger, frustration, stress, they don't have to be negative things. We can sit with them and allow those things to be the entities that they are, and they teach us something. I remember listening to a meditation when I started, or it was an affirmation thing, and it said, I am grateful for the pain that I have felt. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And it says, I'm grateful for the pain I will feel in the future. I'm like, oh no, what, there's more? And then I kind of, sat and thought about them. And yeah, like, you have to have the downs to have the ups. You have to understand what those pain points are in order to know, again, what the contrasting scenario is. And so when you do get upset, you feel sad, you feel frustrated, then, feel those things, experience them, understand what they are in your body. Because if you don't let them have their moment, they get suppressed. And that can build up over so much time. And I know this from firsthand experience. There was frustration and anger surrounding a scenario that I had when I was growing up in my teens. And it's only really now that I can cast a spotlight on it, and I'm in a position to do so. And I'm like, oh yeah, now I understand what that's about. And there's part of me that just wants to go, no, don't experience it. Just feel positive. You choose your thoughts, have positive ones. And I was like, no, because I need to understand this feeling, this sensation. And so I kind of sat with it, and it does a lot more for helping it, release itself than ignoring it and pushing these things away. So
I think that there's truth in all of these sayings, but it doesn't serve us to take them to extremes. So faking it until we make it, yes, but really that is just a saying. And we're not faking it anyway. We're stepping into those shoes that we might not quite feel ready for yet. So we're actually just working towards being more of who we really are. It just feels a little bit scary at the moment, but exciting. So, and the idea of positivity, I've written about this, and it's one of my passions, that yes, choose positive, uplifting, supportive thoughts, but be aware of the other ones. And if they are having an impact on your life, address them and feel into what emotions are going on in your body. They share wisdom. They're not good or bad, right or wrong. They just are. It's our putting things on top of them, meaning and so on, that might make them even more uncomfortable, because we get guilty about being guilty. We get annoyed about being angry and all of these things. So just to allow them, just to observe them, just to notice them, just to let them, because emotions are meant to be energy in motion, emotion. And it's like you say, when we suppress them, when we try to cover them up, because unfortunately we've often been taught, haven't we, that anger is not a good emotion. It's not a nice emotion. It's not something that good girls, for example, ought to feel. And then that traps us into this, I have to be good, I can't show anger, I can't feel anger, when actually anger is sometimes exactly what we we need to feel, we need to express, we need to explore.
Yeah.
So yeah.
To understand it. Yeah, exactly
Yes.
that. I'm sure, Robin, that you know of the Chimp Paradox. I think we might have even discussed it on our last chat. And that talks about the two entities in your mind, well, the predominant ones being the chimp and the human. It's by Dr. Steve Peters. Amazing book. If you haven't read it, I recommend it to anyone at any stage of their kind of life or journey. And it talks about the chimp being this, the emotional, reactive one, and your human being the rational one. And all the chimp wants is to be heard and understood. And once it is, the reactions and severity of the kind of swings in how it manifests itself, they're lessened, and so you have a more kind of even, again, equilibrium in your brain between the chimp and the human, so that they're working in tandem, they're working together, because we fight ourselves so much. We battle, we have this internal struggle with ourselves, and until we can make some headway with lessening that battle, that's when we can have much more productive interactions, not just with other people, but with our environments and with the things that we're doing.
And I often look at people who work with children, because I think those who give these techniques to children are setting those children up for such an empowered life, a life with that toolkit that I wish I'd had at that age.
Yes.
But I see the work that I do as being with those inner children that haven't had that. Because, when I was a child at school, I was lonely, I was miserable, I couldn't make connections very well, and I thought it was all my fault, and I hid away because I didn't want people to see what was going on inside of me, because I thought it was so awful. And that child needed a lot of care and attention and listening to. It needed to be heard. So that's something that I've then had to do in my journey. So I see that as kind of part of my role. I work with people's inner children, helping them to do the same for themselves.
Yeah, and that's lovely. And thank you for sharing your story, because it just you resonate with me every time we speak. So yeah, and I feel that as much as I haven't necessarily put that label on it, I think what I talked about before about finding the right platform to reach people is kind of almost that. It's like I'm trying to speak in generalistic terms to reach the person at whatever point they need to hear it, if that makes sense. So it might be their inner child that needs to be talked to. It might be their masculine side or their feminine side, or hear or receive different messages. And so yeah, it's just about trying to cast that net as wide as possible. And I think it's great to start with children, because let's help them be the best they can be from early as possible. And what impact does that have? The ripple effect that has is great. But we're still people in our own rights too, who still have a lot of work to do and impact that we can make. And so I think that we can't forget about the inner child that still exists, that has to have that voice. So no, I think that's a great thing to think about, and just acknowledging that they are there. And they need our attention, and they need our love, and that they're okay.
And that they give us so much, because without the inner child, we don't have the childlike, that joy, that awe, that wonder that we talked about before. That is an aspect of the inner child to me. And it's when we tune into that we get creative, and we bring out our fun side and all that goes with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, go skipping. That's what I said.
Definitely.
I walked down the pavement, the South Bank yesterday, and made a game out of not standing on the cracks. And it was so much nicer walk. It was so much more fun that and people looked at me like, potentially I was a bit crazy, but most of them were like, oh, she's enjoying herself, you know.
She's having another childhood.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, do it. Like, what have you got to worry about or care about, particularly when it's, you know, things like that. I'm never going to see any of those people again, or might do again, and they'll think, oh, there's that lady who enjoys herself, and then that might have a knock-on effect. So 100%. Release
so dance like nobody's watching.
Yeah, exactly. Dance like nobody is watching.
So if there is a business that wants to work with you, how do they find you or connect with you, bring you in to do what you do for them?
Well, in terms of workplace wellness, LinkedIn, my LinkedIn is definitely the place to find me. So Anna Easton, I can share my contact details. I am on Instagram under my company name, which is true_wellbeing_, but it starts to come up with my face once you start typing in true, so you can find me there. On my website, which you kindly mentioned, Robin, www.truewellbeing.life, L-I-F for Freddie, E. And so any of those ways you can reach me, or Anna at truewellbeing.life. But for workplace wellness, my LinkedIn profile explains a lot more about what I do. So that's probably the best place for that.
Excellent. And I think that's a wonderful place to draw this chat to a close, and just to say a huge thank you, Anna, for joining me today. It's been a joy and a pleasure, as always, to chat with you.
Well, I've been really looking forward to it, and always enjoy connecting with you, Robin, and also just, you know, love that there is these platforms now where we can discuss these things. And I love talking about well-being. It's my passion, it's my life, I can't even call it work because it's enjoyable connecting. So thank you for sharing and for the time.
Brilliant. So thank you all for watching, and if you're watching the replay and you've got any questions or comments, then feel free to just stick in #replay and post your comments below, and we will respond if you have any questions. So join me next time for my next wonderful guest. Keep an eye out and I'll let you know who that's going to be nearer the time. Bye for now.
Lovely. Thanks. Bye-bye.